Order, welcome to this second panel on today's inquiry from the Business and Trade Committee looking at the small business strategy. Thank you very much indeed to our witnesses from across the hair and beauty industry for coming together this afternoon to give us evidence. Caroline, perhaps I can just start with you. Can you just tell us what is going on in your sector at the moment? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? What are the kind of dynamics that you see?
Well, we class it as a perfect storm within the hair and beauty sector. So there's so many different things that are contributing to the small and micro businesses predominantly really struggling out there. We do state of the industry surveys on a quarterly basis. We've done it since COVID, so we get a really good picture of really what's happening in the sector. We also do independent reports, so we're part of that. But some of the figures are, 77% of businesses are going to have to increase their prices and put new costs in place. We've got 47% that are planning to reduce the numbers or cut working hours. We've got 59% that are actually going to be taking on less apprentices, and that's the blood of the industry as part of that. 20% moving from employed status to self-employed status.
Say that last bit again for us.
20% moving from employed status to self-employed status. Yeah. We've got 18% adopting a hybrid employment model.
What does that mean, Caroline? What's a hybrid employment model?
That means they're going to have full-time, like employed staff, part-time employed staff, as well as self-employed people within the business as part of that. And then, 26% are actually planning to downsize or actually exit the industry. And there's obviously a big history in the industry. I have members that have been part of my organisation for 80 years. And we've been going round and, speaking to them and obviously speaking about some of the problems and some of the things. And they've gone through wars, they've gone through, various different things. And they just said, we have never seen it so tight as what it is at the moment.
Gareth,
So I would reinforce entirely what Caroline has said. I think for us, that you've got the increased costs, which the previous panellists talked about. Energy, hairdressing salons are large energy users. You've got the increased cost of NI and threshold, and of course minimum wage rates have gone up a huge amount, and that's hugely impacted apprentice, and I know we'll come on to that in more detail. There are two other big issues for us. So firstly is around the misrepresentation of employed workers as being self-employed, so it's disguised. These people are either told that they will become self-employed on the next working day, but have identical terms and conditions. They're told what to charge, where they're going to go to work, what they're going to wear even. These are employees. But of course, because of a lack of enforcement or visible enforcement, the playing field is not level. And so business A cannot compete paying employers' tax and VAT with business B, where all of the workers have been disaggregated for VAT and they don't pay any employer taxes. You can't compete. The two things will never meet.
Yeah.
And then lastly, because there isn't a mandatory register of those who wish to trade as hairdressers or barbers, anybody could set up as a hairdresser or barber. And this means that, particularly in the barbering sector, lots of money laundering is taking place with illegal gangs. I'm sure you've all seen it in your constituencies. There's been a lot in the media recently, are using barbershop fronts for cleaning money, for crime purposes. And of course, that also impacts on the viability of legitimate businesses who can't compete on price again.
You would say that there's a portion of the high street that's being undercut now because of the spread of organised crime and money laundering.
Absolutely. And you combine that with the other issues, how can a legitimate business survive?
Yeah. Okay. Let's keep building out the picture. Victoria,
Sorry.
We want to just get a kind of a 360 degree from your point of view about what's going on. So Victoria, how do you see things?
All the points made completely valid. It might be helpful if I gave kind of a broader overview of the industry more widely, very, very quickly, of course. So we publish a value of beauty report each year that's pulled together by Oxford Economics, and their evaluation of the industry over this last year is that we are a growth industry, that we contributed £30.4 billion to GDP over this last year. And in terms of our high street representation, for every £1 that you spend in one of our businesses, which you have to have because you need that personal care touch, you can't do these things online, £1 is spent elsewhere in the high street. Not only that, we have a huge dwell time issue where you're coming and you're having a service probably going to be there for a minimum of an hour, you're then hearing the lives and experiences of that employer working in that salon. And if they're happy or they're not happy, they're going to be perpetuating and passing on that information to the member, the person that they're doing the work on.
This moment, say a very brief word about the positive impact that your members and employers have on the nation's mental health.
Huge. Well, yes. In terms of upward social mobility, so we, from the Oxford Economics data, around 40 to 50% of our businesses are in some of the most deprived areas of the UK. So they are at the most highest levels of unemployment, least opportunities available to them. But you will have businesses across our high street, a business like us across the high street. The FSB also have a fantastic statistic, which is 83% of other businesses highlight that they will be near a personal care business in some way on their high street, because they drive that footfall into the high street and give that other type of business that vital kind of funding coming into their jewellers or their bakers or their butchers, for example. So really, really important in that sense. They have a huge impact from the employability side. They have an 81% female workforce. 86% of the businesses are owned by women. We have a huge group of part-time self-employed, as we have discussed here, much higher than the wider economic average. So we offer experiences and opportunities to people where they may need to work around caring responsibilities, or they may be wanting to become entrepreneurs and set up their own businesses. And you can do that at any employment level. You can enter into our industry and have long and meaningful careers.
And now just give us a kind of a quick word about how your members are feeling in the current economy.
I think the words we keep using is cumulative impact. So there's absolutely no doubt that the budget was hugely impactful. We estimate around £400 million impact in terms of cost implication, and that will lead to, predicted by Oxford Economics, around a 2 to 3% decrease in employment figures over the next year. There will still be some level of growth, but the growth will be significantly reduced from this previous year.
Thank you. Toby, just finish rounding out the picture for us. How are your members feeling?
I think it's important just to clarify a point. I represent salon owners and service-based businesses. The 30.4 billion you refer to is across beauty retail sector. I'm talking about the service side of the business, which is 4.6 billion in 2023 for service-based businesses, and the story is extraordinarily different within those. Those businesses have an average of 3% retail and 97% services. So we are looking at two very different things here. With regards to growth or decline, we produced a report with CBI Economics in February 2025, and it talked about, it's basically demonstrated the industry is in a great deal of trouble for some of the reasons that people have already talked about, and specifically around disguised employment and faux self-employment, and the imbalanced tax system. The tax system against hairdressing and beauty service businesses is the highest on the high street. We can go into that more in a moment. CBI report demonstrated that fiscally between 2009 and 2023, our industry contracted both in VAT turnover businesses and others by 10%. 10% down from 2009 in the official figures. The economy grew by 53% in the same time. So we're 44% lower than we should have been had the industry been able to grow legitimately throughout that period. That's my thing.
That is not a happy picture. Consideration panel one. So let's just dive into some of the details, starting with Joshua Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. I want to talk a little bit more about the impacts of last autumn's budget on the sector. So, Victoria, you've already started the ball rolling on £400 million worth of cost impact. Could you go into a bit more detail on that and where it's coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had the national insurance contribution up and the threshold lowered. Wage increases, we are largely an employer that generally is on the lower end of the minimum wage rate, so they will have staff that are starting on that level. When that minimum wage rate goes up, the incremental increases between their members of staff generally has to go up as well. We're also a huge user of apprenticeships. So we were previously in the top 5 most popular apprenticeships. We now are seeing a huge decline in that because it's generally one of the first things that go when a business is struggling to make ends meet. So that, in addition to the business rates relief reduction from 75 to 40%, that had a massive implications, and that was mentioned in the previous evidence. So I would just really echo the points that were made in relation to business rates relief. That will continue to have a massive impact on small businesses in ours. We also have the capital gains tax changes, the utility costs. We use a huge amount of water, as I'm sure you can imagine, and utilities more generally. And also the cost of product has increased, so from suppliers that also has gone up. There's also being tied to lease agreements or rent rises, which are generally difficult to manage and control. So all of those things kind of accumulated together, kind of created, as Caroline rightly said, this perfect storm of just a lot of burden hitting businesses at a time when they're really only just beginning to recover post-COVID.
Caroline, have you got a sense of what impacts those increases, the NI, the thresholds, minimum wage and everything is having on the almost faux self-employment figures?
Well, from the figures that I said before, it's growing, and businesses have, particularly my members, unfortunately I have 4,600 members across the UK. They're all hair and beauty businesses, all different shapes and sizes as part of that. And one of the biggest things we did when we had the announcement is we put in a campaign, and it was about Survive and Thrive, and it was about supporting those businesses to look at their business model and look at it with a fresh set of eyes. So we've been working with Ofgem, we've been working with a lot of other people to really try and support those businesses, because at the grassroots they're frightened for their livelihood, and some of these businesses, as I said before, have been on the high street for such a long period of time, and then they're actually having something and they're going, actually we can only increase our prices so far until the consumer doesn't want to pay anymore.
And Gareth, from your members, obviously you said you don't have to register, and there's no official log really of who is hairdressers, who are barbers. It's that voluntary basis. What are you hearing from your members about the impacts of the budget really hitting home on not only on the members but also on their clients as well, maybe impacting how many times the clients come to see your members?
I'd absolutely reiterate what Victoria and Caroline have said. The hairdresser doesn't feel that they can increase their prices anymore because of the unlevel playing field. And that's fundamentally, if the budget was in exclusivity and the playing field was level, we would be in a different position. Part of the issue is the budget really did hit service-based industries like ours hard and continues to do so. Any further increases in minimum wage, for example, particularly on the apprentice side, will have a really devastating impact. These are people who want to do the right thing by their community. Hairdressing is at its heart a community enterprise. You mentioned mental health, Chair, and that's an important part of your hairdressing or beauty service. It is the core of our community, and that is what is at risk. And our members, as Caroline says, they're scared.
Cooper.
So if I could come to you first, you mentioned VAT there, and we're hearing about some of the imbalances within the budget. Now everyone knows about the £90,000 VAT registration limit, and it's a real cliff edge, and lots of industries complain about that. But there's a particular quirk here, isn't there, with an employment-heavy industry where you're not able to claim those VAT charges back to the same extent that others might be. Could you just walk us through that?
Yeah, I'll just give you the figures in terms of what's happened with faux self-employment so far, or self-employment in the sector. We were around 300,000 people in the sector, service-based in 2015. We're now at 230,000. There's 70,000 people disappeared. The CBI report has already shown that employment in the sector was 150,000 in that period, has already reduced to 86,500, and post-budget in the survey it predicts a 97% fall to 7,000, whilst employment or self-employment, faux self-employment sometimes, is going to grow to 225,000. The unique problem that we have in this industry is pretty simple. Most of the other things are across the rest of the service sector, across the rest of retail. Most of them don't worry about us. 60% of our costs are labour. If you increase labour costs in the way that NICs were increased, and that's been done by successive administrations, you hit our businesses 5 times harder than other retail. You hit our businesses 5 times harder than other retail, and you've got 2 businesses next door to each other. One turns over 400,000 and employs 5 people. the other one turns over 400,000 and is 5 separate businesses or micro businesses who employ nobody, they do not pay any VAT. That one business who's employing people doing the right thing, £105,000 in tax. Next door, 47 grand, and I can tell you that you wouldn't know the difference if you stood outside them.
Let's just make sure we're really clear about this, Toby. So you've got two businesses. One is employing 5 people. The other is micro business, 5 people. They might all be hiring a chair or a bed or something. So the VAT difference is what?
£67,000 in VAT. Overall tax is 105,000 for one and 47,000 for the other.
So one is employing almost 50,000.
23% more tax. Yeah. Why would you not? If every single person around you, your 15 salons around you, you're in a town in the northeast and someone says, I want to go self-employed, otherwise I'm going to leave you. What do you do? Yeah. Your house is on the line. What do you do? You move because you have to.
What happens with the businesses paying less VAT? Do they basically charge lower prices, or?
That's exactly what happens. They can afford to charge less prices. £120 for a haircut, one place, £100 next door. What happens to the employing business? They have to reduce their price, they have to reduce their price, they have to reduce their price. There's no margin left. What do? They get rid of their apprentice. They get rid of the person in front of the house. They get rid of every single thing that's good about our industry. Yeah. Our industry is incredible. Number 1 occupier in the high street for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Mr. Keeper?
You're painting a picture here where people are effectively being driven away from VAT. They're actively seeking to avoid it then. So they are doing, as you say, the wrong thing. Is that quite a common story?
I'm not saying they're actively doing it. I'm saying there is absolutely no choice in certain circumstances. If there's absolutely no choice, what do you get? You get a society where people are treated like the woman who came to work for me recently, who was told, sign this chair rental contract. Don't worry, it's just for tax. Patted her on the head. She came to me not very long ago and asked for a job. She was getting paid £7 an hour because you've created a whole town. There's a whole city in the southwest where not one barber in the whole city employs barbers. Not one. Guy puts himself through college. Guy puts himself through gets his Kickstarter loan, gets all of his things. He goes in, he does a 12-hour shift, he's told what to do. He earns 36 quid. That's where this goes, right? If you don't protect worker rights, that's where this goes. If you have the imbalance in the system that we have right now and you don't level the playing field, there will be no employees left and there will be no employment workers' rights bill. You need to look at businesses across the spectrum, across society, and understand that some, when all taxes are applied equally, get hammered.
Which is the city?
I will tell you later, because it will protect the anonymity of the person
private business.
What I'm talking about.
Sonia Kumar.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to ask in 2 parts here. So the business birth rates in the hair and beauty sector has increased since 2023. Compared to the national picture. Why do you think this sector has bucked the trend? I think there might be some things you've already mentioned, but I'll start with Toby and then go across.
Right, sorry, can you start the first part of the question?
So the business birth rates in the hair and beauty sector has increased since 2023 compared to the national picture. Yeah. Why do you think the sector has bucked the trend? I think there's some things we already mentioned.
I don't think there's a trend at all. I think we've already described it. You've talked about there being 91% more micro businesses. Well, salons across the land, and we've given you some details already, close their business overnight and they open 10 new businesses tomorrow. It's absolutely not growth. Yeah. Absolutely categorically not growth.
Can I add that? It's different. So each of the sectors are different. So generally what happens with hair and beauty is it all gets lumped into one. And unfortunately, the hairdressing sector is different to the barbering sector, which is different to the beauty sector.
This might be different to Victoria's.
So the beauty sector and the aesthetic sector, if you go on the high street, you will see a beauty salon and you will probably see an aesthetic clinic that are doing really, really well because the consumers are spending on that area. It seems to be peaking at the moment, and that's probably where your statistics are coming from on the growth side of things, not predominantly perhaps the hair and the barbering side, which is
What's Victoria then?
That's where the SIC code, and my boss is going to love that I've mentioned this today, but the Standard Industrial Classification Code, at the moment, we are lumped in with laundrettes, with funeral directors, with other services, and it's frankly insulting because it means that there is absolutely no way to distinguish between all of the many facets that Caroline's identified across our industry. So we've been working as a British Beauty Council diligently for 5 years to try and update these to a certain degree, and we're basically there, but we're still in a situation at the moment where hair and beauty is clubbed in as one. So where we've had a sector in decline in the hair sector for over a decade, so even pre-COVID times, the other elements of the beauty industry, professional services we're talking here, have been in growth, as Caroline mentioned. So aesthetics, hugely on the rise. Barbering, to be fair, is very, very popular. But as Toby mentioned, what we've seen is an increase of 46% over the last decade of businesses that are under five employees. And so that is ultimately one-man bands, people that are working for themselves. And let's get this straight, there are people that are wanting to do that, doing it legitimately and earning a good wage, and should be able to do that legally. But there are also others that are going through a disguised self-employment model, which we do need to tackle. And that's where we're working with people like the HMRC to produce better guidelines so that employers can make sure that they are fully aware of, if they're going down this line of having self-employed people working in their salons or employed people working in their salons, they're clear what that distinction is and what the expectation is from them from both sides.
Are we going to fix this with better guidelines?
I think it's a start, and that's as far as we've got so far. But absolutely, there's more that we should be doing, and yeah, I completely take your point there.
Gareth, to your point initially that you said about money laundering and what's happening on shop fronts, can you go into a little bit more detail?
Absolutely. So I think we can all identify on our high streets barbers which don't look right. And actually, if you talk about your growth, well, some of the growth in barbering is because of these illegal enterprises. They do have a similar look and feel to these shops, but because there's no register of who can trade as a hairdresser or barber, there's nothing to stop these enterprises being opened. It isn't right to call them Turkish barbers. That's a misnomer. These are criminal enterprises being used for money laundering, which has been derived through people smuggling, drugs, prostitution, and other illegal activities. They are clever people. They have identified a loophole in our system, and they are taking advantage of it.
And it goes into modern, it goes into modern slavery as well, and we've worked with the Home Office on this around barbershops and nail bars as well, which can be particularly prevalent in this area. It's not something we want to excuse. We're here to professionalise and raise the reputation of the industry. We don't want to be standing next to these people that are frankly abusing a fantastic industry for their own kind of ill-gotten gains.
Have you got your hand up, so I'll finish that.
I'll try to politely jump in. For me, it's a really, really simple fix. You've tried to give us rules. You've tried to supposedly enforce. The gap's so wide that if you don't level the playing field between the gig economy workers, self-employed, disguised self-employed, then this will continue forever. Look at the biggest organisations in the country who deliver goods. Do they employ anybody? No, they don't. Did they get touched by the last budget? No, they didn't. You have to narrow the gap between different business models if you want the successful employment, or we'll all just go that way, because enforcement hasn't worked. Enforcement has not worked.
Really interested from the association's perspectives. What response you mentioned, actually, Victoria, about the Home Office? What response are you getting from the Home Office on the suggestion that there are a lot of illegal businesses involved in money laundering? I'm sure many of your members are on the high street, they can identify or would suggest that these are. How is that process of identification being fed to Home Office and then to police for them to investigate?
I must admit, my work with them has mainly been around modern slavery as opposed to money laundering, so it may be better for Gareth for that question. Okay. But at the moment, it's mainly around a whistleblowing facility, so we encourage members and businesses to be reporting that information to the relevant authorities within their either the local area or with the police and the Home Office directly.
Sometimes that doesn't work so well with the police directly. It might be better to actually have this channeled straight into Home Office and for it to come back down again.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and what I tend to find is that we kind of have a team in Home Office that gets put with us, and then they'll do a little bit of work, and then we get a change of personnel. They come back again 18 months later, the work starts again, you hear nothing, 18 months change, 18 months change.
What's the industry's sense of how much is being lost in terms of business to these illegal operations?
I think that's very difficult to answer because we don't know how many there are. And so, picking up on Victoria's comment, I think the work is often done in silos instead of it being countrywide. So maybe one police force, the West Midlands, for example, we were doing quite a lot of work with, were very proactive for a 3-month period. That project runs out of funding and so stops. And all that happens is the people are arrested one day, released, somebody else is back in that premises the next day because, again, they're clever. So we would like to see a much wider cross-governmental approach to this. DBT have been good and have been helping to drive this in towards Home Office.
We've got a loophole. It's driving good firms out of business. It's laundering money. It's contributing to modern slavery. And there is no sustained enforcement effort to shut it down. Is that what you're telling us, Gareth?
Correct. So there's the 1964 Hairdressers Registration Act is a voluntary register of those who wish to practice as hairdressers or barbers. If it was simply changed to be a mandatory register, at least we would know who was working or wanting to work in this sector. It would not solve all of these problems.
How many of these establishments, to the best of your knowledge, have actually ever been shut down as a result of enforcement action?
And not reopened?
Mm-hmm.
None?
I don't think there's been any. I mean, we work with environmental health, so we work with environmental health officers that can go into these businesses, but what the environmental health officers are saying to us, we haven't got teeth. We haven't got anything to have teeth to shut these down. So some of them are doing really illegal practices in there, really, really poor techniques, but there is nothing those environmental health officers can do because all they can do is the employment at law work.
We've got these kind of epicentres of crime on the high street. Yeah. It's not just a crime in itself, it's destroying other small businesses around it. None have been shut down and there's no sustained enforcement effort either.
Correct. And the remaining sector of our industry, as Victoria said, primarily women, many, many young people. I mean, this is not safer streets.
Yeah.
Please, yeah.
It's the same applies to nail bars, presumably.
Yes. Yeah.
There are can I just be specific about that? I've got a moment. I would say it's very, very prevalent in the barbering and nail bars and so on industry. I don't think it's the same problem in hairdressing. Hairdressing is about the imbalance. It's 90% about that, 10% about enforcement. Really, the focus has got to be around balancing the playing field. I think if we look at that's the point I wanted to make. Sorry, the only other thing I was going to say is with regards to hairdressing, and when you look at the tax system and you look at taxes applied versus retail, we're paying 200% more in taxes, and we've got those stats to back up, which we can give you later.
Antonia Burns.
Thank you very much, Chair. This committee has previously discussed during its Employment Rights Bill inquiry the issues around the commitment to the review of employment status, which I think if employment status were to be reviewed, that would be a way into some of the issues that you flagged, Toby. I wonder if you think it would be worth presuming that everybody is employed unless they can prove that they're self-employed, which has been one of the suggestions that has been made around employment status and might be something that I think we all hope the government might take forward when it gets to its review.
I think it would be helpful. I don't actually really want to pit an industry against itself. I don't blame these people for moving to self-employment.
No. Oh, it's a collective action problem,
no,
right? It's individually
it's
helpful and collectively dreadful.
No, look, from a personal perspective, as a business owner who employs everybody, yeah, great, go for it. I think the industry is so far down the line and so ill-advised and doesn't have the knowledge, enforcement, doesn't have, you talked about guidelines. We're in a sort of grey zone where nobody really knows what's going on. But if you wanted to put that in place, it might be helpful. I think actually it would be very helpful, but I'm going to be incredibly unpopular for saying that because 70% of our workforce is self-employed. So, as an employer and in protecting employment rights, in protecting the employees, making it a level playing field so that my employees can earn the same as supposedly self-employment, and actually what happens is you just drive the whole business down. we've occupied high streets as the number one occupier for 10 years. Give us an opportunity, give us a level playing field, we'll grow the high streets for you. We'll bring millions and millions and millions of people in. That's what we do. We'll make people feel amazing. We'll bring tens of thousands of young women into a profession that gives them status and career that they wouldn't have otherwise had.
Self-employment, it isn't something new. So an ex-hairdresser 37 years ago, my first job, I was self-employed. I worked in that business. We used the cash till, you had the uniform and everything. It's not something new for the industry. What we've just found over the last couple of years is just massively grown. And I think there just has to be that informed, view from the industry to tell them that it isn't right and it's the way through. So, yeah, okay, HMRC have got checklists and stuff like that, but it really needs a mind shift. You're talking something of like 20, 30 years of people being used to this and thinking it's a norm. It's not something that can change overnight.
But when done properly, self-employment is something to aspire to. And I think that's been wonderful within our sector, as Caroline says, for many years. Most of the salon owners were employees at some point, and I think whatever changes come mustn't penalise that aspiration. That's something we should encourage. What we should try and stop is self-employment being used as a vehicle for tax avoidance.
Yeah.
It was still the number one aspiration for all people we surveyed in our recent Future of Hairdressing, that everyone still aspires to own their own salon one day.
What do you want to say?
Thank you. Toby, you touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to bring in a couple of other points around apprenticeships. I remember when I was finishing school, lots of girls from my school aspired and very proud of the fact that they were going on to do apprenticeships in salons, but the British Hair Consortium says we risk being at 0 apprenticeships by 2027, which I think is a really shocking number. Caroline, I know at the National Hair and Beauty Federation you said you think that's because of the stigma around the sector, but I just wanted to bring from all of you why you think that is, but also what we can do to make hair and beauty apprenticeships viable again, maybe starting at Toby, because I know you picked up on it previously.
I don't think we have any problem with young women wanting to come into the industry whatsoever. We have no employers willing to take them on. We have apprenticeships at 16,000 in 2016, already down at 6,000 by 2023. That's why we're predicting those things. You increase national minimum wage, you increase NICs, you give nothing back on those things, you take away all of the profit that an employed business has got, there's nothing left. I'll tell you a story. The biggest employer in this country of apprentices told me last night they had 150 apprentices 6 months ago. They were responsible for the qualification of 10% of all apprentices in this country every year, and they've now got 50. They lost 100 in 6 months. 100 young people in that one organisation, made up of franchises, small businesses, all of these things. We're not talking about big business here. The tax burden on our sector is too big. Drop that to 10% for service-based businesses, allow them to grow past that ridiculous threshold of 90,000, the cliff edge that makes nobody want to move. There's a reason why electricians and plumbers don't take on apprentices, because as soon as you go above the VAT threshold, you lose 15 grand. So why do no electricians, plumbers, or anyone have medium-sized businesses? You can ask them in a minute, probably, when they come in. But that VAT cliff edge, the 15,000 loss scares people so much that they are not willing to grow at all. And if you can split a business into 5 that don't do it, then why would you not? It's got nothing to do with... We've got massive oversubscription. 344... I spoke to a trainer in the Northwest. 344 applications for 62 places. They can only fill 56, and they're worried about getting less because there's no employers to take the apprentice. These training organisations get paid to train people. The employer gets nothing. Me, as a salon owner, gets nothing, maybe £1,000. It really doesn't make that much odds, right? So why would I spend £30,000 a year training somebody who, once they've qualified, immediately someone goes, oh, why don't you come and work for me? You don't have to pay any tax. That happens every single day. That's why we've got a crisis.
Any other quick perspectives? Caroline?
For me, I've been involved in apprenticeships for the last 20 years. We've gone from having 14,000 in 2014 apprentices to now, as Toby said, under 5,000 as part of that. There's been a lot of things that have changed. There was the apprenticeship funding band, and it really did obliterate the apprenticeships. It's great now. We had to reapply and redo it, and it's great. But unfortunately now we've not got the employers to take those apprentices on. Careers advice is another thing. We're not the career of choice. We don't get promoted in schools. We're doing a lot of work on that sort of thing. But again, it's a whole different types of issues that have actually contributed to this. It's just not one thing. It's just that the employer status now is the icing on the cake for businesses.
Can I add one small quick point? So the completion rate also of apprenticeships has completely fallen off the face of the earth. So now we have 82% generally don't finish, so they don't complete it. And that can be anything from, if you have an older apprentice, after that first year you have to pay them whatever the level of minimum wage is for their age band. So if you are having an apprentice that's over the age of 25, then that's a huge increment increase from your apprenticeship wage rate to your minimum wage rate for that age band. It's also things like not the young people coming in not really understanding what it is that the apprenticeship is giving them. Now there's a mandatory education till 18. A lot of people are just kind of falling into the industry. We actually did 77,000 qualifications each year for hair and beauty services, but we know those people aren't coming into the industry, and that's a massive issue for us. So we definitely need to be doing more to kind of educate people as to what they can expect from that, but also educate employers so that they know what they're using their apprentices for. I think sometimes they're kind of used for cheap labour, and that shouldn't be allowed either. So we need to be making sure that apprenticeship system is fit for purpose and actually ends up with business-ready people at the end of it. Some of the feedback we get from businesses is they've just done a 3-year course and they're actually really no use to me. They're not there ready to earn money for me and my business.
Right, let's come on to the small business strategy. Sonia Human.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now going to say there's a lot of barriers and lots of challenges that have been come today, but what I want to know is if you had one ask to go into the small business strategy and you had one ask from DBT, what would that ask be? And I was able to do that. So I'll go with Caroline first.
I think if I asked my members what would be the one ask, would be a reform on VAT would be one of the big things as part of that, and then on education training, apprenticeship sides.
So I would add to reforming the tax system a mandatory register of those who wish to trade.
Yeah, I completely agree on VAT and tax reform more generally, but business rates relief has had huge implications, and I would basically echo what the gentleman from the SB was saying around increasing that multiplier and the thresholds around that would be massively helpful.
I was asked this question by former Minister for State for Skills, Robert Harfon, once, and he said, what can I do to help you? And I said, you can level the tax playing field. And he came back to me and said, no, but what can I really do? And I said, you can level the tax playing field. And guess what? He asked me a third time, and my answer was the same. For me, levelling the tax playing field, allow the brilliant people of this industry to grow it back to what it was. Understand, don't act in silos, actually, is probably the other thing I would say. I think that's very much something that's happened in government. Education are separate from HMRC, are separate from DBT, are separate from Treasury, are separate from... Get us all in a room for a day and we'll sort the problem out. Yeah. We'll come up with a system that actually puts more money in Treasury's coffers and grows the economy and grows high streets. So...
Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. So sort of leading on from that question, you've all given different answers. We've heard actually a lot of things that need to change, a lot of problems. One of the areas that we've been looking at has been business energy costs, and particularly the issue not just around how high the cost is, but the behaviour of the suppliers and the imbalance between being a small or medium-sized business and dealing with the giants who have billions in their turnover. And I just wondered whether you had experiences, whether your members come to you, and whether there were things that you wanted to share on that, and also what you think needs to change in that area.
So I'm happy to... So I think the comments made by the previous panel around treating small business owners like a consumer, I would absolutely echo. Many of our members are not purchasing in a sophisticated manner, whether that is energy, insurance, or a credit card terminal, and they consider themselves to have the same rights as a consumer because that's their mindset. So I would absolutely encourage for those rules to be extended to small business owners.
Really helpful.
We often find as well there's huge appetite to more greener measures. So if there was greater incentives around kind of greener energy, transitioning into more energy efficiency within our businesses, as I mentioned, we use a huge amount of water. There'll be huge amounts that you could do to have that reduced. There's new special shower heads and things. If there was some kinds of tax relief around green energy or green products which kind of help with energy efficiency, that would be massively helpful.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. I'm not a huge user of the services of your companies and
How many
representatives.
products did you use before you left the house today?
Very little, I would say.
Did you use toothpaste? Did you use toothpaste?
But I'm
Did you use shower
hugely
gel?
grateful to you for your evidence and for the contribution that your members make to the dynamism, entrepreneurialism and energy of our economy. And this evidence today has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for coming together and spending time with us this afternoon as we launch our Small Business Inquiry. That concludes this panel.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Order. Welcome to this third panel on today's hearings as we launch our inquiry into the small business strategy. Thank you so much, Brian Berry, Paul Brain, for joining us today. I just want to kick off our questions about the construction industry. Paul, perhaps you could kick off. Just give us a sense of how the industry is feeling right now about the economy.
Yeah, okay. At the moment, there's probably two answers to that. So the company I run deals with more refurbishment of roofs rather than new builds. So the refurbishment side of the business is quite buoyant at the moment, with lots of local authorities, councils and housing associations carrying out lots of retrofit and refurbishment work. So retrofit, solar panels and upgrading their homes. It is, yeah. And then on the flip side of that, with the new build, I'm the current chair of the National Federation of Roofing Contractors of the South West and South Wales. So I'm kind of speaking broadly from the feedback I've had from a lot of contractors. So the new build sector, the feel is that it's dipping slightly and slowing, partly due to a little bit of political uncertainty. There's a budget later on in the year, so people are worried about what tax rises are coming. So I think developers are selling less houses, so that side's slipping. And then on the domestic side of things, the sort of privately owned homes, I'm getting feedback from roofing suppliers that the footfall in is dipped and stagnated as well. So two answers really. Refurbishment is going well, but the new build and private sector is showing signs of slowing down.
Okay, Brian, how does that compare to the messages you're hearing from across the industry?
Yeah, well, similar, except I would say the mood is probably a bit more cautious. we carry out a survey of our members to find out what's happening in terms of workloads and inquiries. Our latest results are from the end of last year, Q4. So workloads at that time had decreased by 11% and inquiries had dropped by 23%. But anecdotally, as I'm going around the country this year talking to members, they seem to have in the RMI sector enough work at the moment, but their inquiries are fewer than they had last year. So there seems to be a slight nervousness about will there be enough work at the end of the year or going into 26.
Many of your members, I mean, how many months ahead is their pipeline full?
It will vary because the F&B has sold traders to very large companies. So some will have 6 months, 12 months, some have years of work ahead of them. It will vary considerably. But overall, what I'm picking up is actually there's enough work and the RMI sector is doing well. And that's been backed up by the ONS latest figures for April this year, which RMI had grown by 0.3%. But that's lower than construction overall at 0.9%. And I think that reflects a nervousness amongst consumers about having home improvements because of the current economic challenges and obviously difficulties in terms of inflation and living costs, which are still quite high for a lot of people.
Growth, but a lot of nervousness and jitters about the future.
I think it's just cautious. I mean, there's work there, definitely, but it's not... there's an apprehension, I think, what will follow and whether there might be some tax increases later in the year.
First question, Brian, I'm just trying to get my head around Federation Master Builders and kind of so small and medium businesses is kind of who I think you represent. I'm just trying to understand. So does that include people like Barrett and Taylor Wimpey and Persimmon, Bellway, Vistry, or so they don't? So is there another trade body for them, or how does that all fit together?
Yeah. So just to be very clear, the Federation Master Builders, we are a trade body for small and micro building companies. They are not part of that supply chain. So companies like Barrett's. These are large companies which have their own supply chain, they have their own specialist contractors. There's a whole field of small companies. My members are mostly doing domestic home repairs. They'll be the people coming into your home to do a home extension or loft conversion. They will looking at the retrofit market. And we've got about 10% of our members who build houses, but they're building typically 5 or 6 houses a year. These are the micro house builders. So we are outside that big supply chain, a tier 1 supply chain. We are these are principal contractors, but operating in the domestic sector.
And I mean, I think maybe the public's got a kind of nostalgic, like where have all the small and medium-sized builders gone who were building houses?
Yes.
Is it just like, well, that's just gone, or is it that it's incredibly unbalanced playing field, and the reason they're being squeezed out is these reasons? Please.
Yeah, so you're quite right to identify housing, because over the last 40 years, the percentage of new homes built by SME house builders has fallen from 40% in the late 1980s to what I understand now is below 10%. Yeah. So there's downward decline, far fewer, and what you have now is a housing market that's dominated by the major house builders. Over 80% are building the homes in this country today. And we carry out an annual survey of our house building members to find out what is happening, what are the barriers, why aren't they building? And the survey from last year, November 24, identified the planning system as the number 1 barrier at 76%, the lack of viable land at 61%, lack of available land at 57%. So they are struggling with the planning system and finding suitable land. And this is a problem with the local planning process, where local plans don't allocate enough small sites for local house builders. So they're struggling to find the land. Even if they find the land, the planning process is too slow and it's expensive. And obviously obligations have increased over recent years. And that, for a very small company, is more onerous because they don't have the in-house teams compared to larger house builders. So the burden on them is greater, and it has a disproportionate impact on those small house building companies, which probably explains why a lot of them have left the market.
And
as an executive member of planning, very briefly in a previous district council, I felt the pain. I mean, essentially, you've got national government, whatever stripe, frankly, saying you've got to build, 1,000 houses this year, otherwise you're for the high jump, 5-year housing land supplies and everything else. In terms of managing that much smaller level, would you be advocating kind of like, well, there's got to be a few percent, 5%, 10%, which is bounded in some way, and what would be those boundaries be, and what would really help that local building industry to build houses? I think what would help
is, one, for the local plan to increase the percentage of homes dedicated or small sites. So at the moment it's 10%. If we could double that, that would certainly help. Also, it'd be really good if local authorities had the capacity to engage with local developers, because local developers could identify some of those small sites and work with local authorities about what is needed. The challenge, of course, is local authorities are strapped for cash. It's more expensive to have a number of contracts with SMEs compared to using a larger developer. And also the planning teams lack the specialism to deal with small house builders. So that under-resourcing of planning departments is actually working against local house builders, which is a shame, because it's the local house builders who train the local people, they take on the apprentices, they should be the catalyst for regional growth all across the country, but they're not. It's going in the wrong direction, and so you have larger house builders who are coming in, bring their own labour force, move them around the country, and you don't get the benefits of regional economic growth if local authorities, in terms of their procurement, took on more local house builders.
It's not square foot for square foot. Do small house builders, are they more expensive than the bigger house builders and just building homes?
I haven't got the figures, but I suspect there would be a premium for smaller house builders. But we know from surveys that customer satisfaction is much higher with smaller house builders, because they are based in the locality. Their reputation depends on the quality of work.
It would be really useful for us to get it.
Just one thing to touch on there. Larger building companies may have better buying power for materials, so they can get better deals with materials rather than a small builder, and they could drive costs down with their subcontractors. So the quality might not be as good. A small builder would build you a better quality house, but a little bit more expensive.
Thank you. Sarah Evans.
Thank you, Chair. And just sort of building on that, so I'm the chair of the SME House Builders APPG, and so I've been getting to grips with a lot of the challenges that SME house builders have been raising. And I just wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on what you were saying about the issues in navigating the complexity of the regulations and how workable they are for the smaller firms, because we know that there's this imbalance between the larger firms and the smaller firms, namely they don't have the staff. But I just wondered if you could add a bit more colour to some of the challenges that they face.
Well, for small companies, I suppose it is navigating the planning system in terms of applications, because it comes down to time and money, because actually submitting the planning applications obviously takes them longer. They don't have in-house teams to submit the planning application. Then there are the obligations which they have to comply with, and those have increased. So we've had biodiversity net gains. Section 106 agreements vary from local authority to local authority, and the interpretation of planning laws vary from local authority to local authority as well. Also, there's an issue about communication. I know that local authorities say, well, we're not getting the information that we need from the local developers, which slows down the process, which is why I think, there needs to be a more joined up approach between local developers and local authorities. The creation of a developer forum where both sides could talk more openly about applications before they're submitted would certainly help. Or if there was additional resources, for there to be a specialised SME planning officer who could work to actually improve the applications, which would make it easier to process them as they go through the planning process. So you can't put your finger on one thing, but there are lots of different things, as you know, in terms of actually helping local developers. But the availability of the land is one of the big issues. Those very small sites, we're talking 3-4 houses. If we could have captured those, and I think the Greater London Authority has an app where all these very small sites is available. If that could be replicated, then that would really help.
I believe there are some talks to do that and expand that out there for exactly that reason, to make sure that it's much easier to find that land. The other thing I've spoken to some small house builders about was this issue in the proportionality, so how much you pay for your planning consent, and how that is much, much cheaper for a larger house, a volume house builder, than those smaller ones. So that they were wanting a proportionality clause, for example, to be put in, so that actually it was scalable rather than being a very blunt instrument as it is at the moment.
I think that's a very fair point, because actually it's a disproportionate impact on the micro house builders. And also I think the other issue is about guidance, and making sure that the guidance can be understood easily by a small micro building company who don't have the in-house resources to navigate sometimes often complex requirements.
Right, thank you.
Anything to add to that picture?
No, sir. Well done, Brian. No, I think with the sort of pockets of land sort of becoming increasingly smaller, and the availability, I think it goes back to the sort of power of the big house builders and the tier one contractors. So small builders are sort of getting edged out a little bit more. They're finding it more and more difficult to find those pockets of land. And yeah, the costs and the complexities of going through building control can be quite difficult. So a large contractor will probably employ the consultants, the specialists, to navigate a lot of that. From a roofing perspective, it doesn't really affect us a great deal, because with a new build, the roofs are signed off by the National House Building Council, so that's not really down to us. With the NFRC, we've got a sister company, the Competent Person Scheme, so if a roofing contractor is registered on that, we can self-certify and prove that the roof's done to the current building regulations and building British standards. So we offer guarantees as a contractor with that. With the CPS, you can have a 15-year guarantee, insurance-backed guarantee, and many of the manufacturers with roofing materials will offer a 15-year warranty as well. So we can navigate around it if we need to, but generally speaking, with the house builders, that's over to them with the regulations, really.
Reynolds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. How much, Paul, starting with you, how much damage do you think late payments cause the construction industry?
This is my favourite question, to be honest. The late payments are devastating for SMEs. Me personally, I'll speak from my own perspective, owning a SME. I actively avoided working for tier one contractors and large main contractors right from the off, but I have, through one reason or another, been involved with them on two projects. I'm working with one now, and both experiences have been horrendous with finance. There's all manner of tactics that tier ones adopt.
Can you just explain tier ones for those who
tier ones are
the
the sort of big, large contractors that are kind of mainly the top of the tree, basically, in direct consultation, say, with a government body, with public contracts, and then they, basically, the majority of them are management companies then that subcontract the work out to the SMEs. So on a ground level, really, it's the SMEs that do literally the lion's share of the work, and they're managed by a main contractor or a tier one.
And we've heard in the first panel about the new Fair Payments Code. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Fair Payments Code is able to deal with the complexity of supply chains that the construction industry has?
In principle, it's a good idea, but unfortunately there's not many contractors have actually signed up for it. So
why do you think that is?
Because they probably don't want to be regulated and forced to pay fairly, basically. My experiences of working with the tier ones is not good. A lot of my colleagues within the roofing sector doing the new build properties, they have harrowing stories of being held to ransom with payments. So, payment terms are a big issue. The sector I'm in, really, I get paid in 30 days or less, which is great for cash flow, turnover, and helping me to grow. A lot of the other companies, they work for companies that their payment terms might be 60 or 90 days. So, from day one when you're working for them, you put your first invoice on 30 days for let's say £50,000, they're going to pay you in 60 days' time if they pay you on time. But from day 1 to day 90, you're going to get your first payment. In the second sort of sector, you're going to do another 30 days and invoice them another 50,000, and the cycle continues on. So as you go further down the line, the tier 1 will owe you more and more money as you go along. So then you're dancing to their tune, really. They can tell you and dictate to you your working practices. You're at their mercy, really. So then if they tactics, for example, a couple of days before you're due your payment, they'll contact you and say there's a discrepancy with your invoice. Can you resubmit it? And then the cycle starts again. It happens all the time. And as like I said, the 2 instances I'm working on now, there's one work, and they issued me out of the blue a pay less notice because they weren't happy with my invoices, literally just before they were due to pay, and it totaled £180,000. So I was faced with a £180,000 black hole in my company for no reason. I challenged it, I won, and they paid me within 7 days. So they had my money, but they were trying to hold out paying me on time. So those practices, I could go on till 8 or 9 o'clock this evening, but they are happening all the time.
Yeah, and I just want to echo that, because actually 3/4 of my members have said they've had problems with late payments.
Let me just stop you there. I just want to bring in Sonia Kumar. Have you got just a different angle on this that Brian might pick up?
So in my constituency, one of the builders has come to speak to me, and it's exactly the same point. It's the late payments. So it's been subcontracted to do some work. Therefore, he hasn't been paid, and it's because of a late payment. What do you think should be the gold standard for sort of the time frame, and how do you think we can improve practice throughout? And do you think there needs to be just more transparency? You say, right, this is my business, these are the terms, and all sort of larger firms need to be held to that account, say you have to have 30 days and there's no leeway on this.
I think it's a valid point. The payment terms are key, really. So 60 days is a long time for a small company to wait for their money, and it's a big financial risk. So coupled with the fact that more often than not we're going to have a retention held back of up to 5% from a year of practical completion. So if I were working for a house builder and building and re-roofing, say, 200 houses, I'll be held a retention all the way through that, then at practical completion at the end, so that could be £1 million worth of roofing. That practical completion starts from then, so I need to wait another year for my retention to come in. So as we know, a lot of things can happen in a year. That tier 1 goes bust, ceases to trade, all the money's gone. I know, personally know people now that are owed up to £500,000 in retentions, and they're waiting and they're sweating and they want their money. But as we know from last year, major companies going bust. So going back to your question, I think fair payment terms are a must. Maybe enforcing strict payment discipline. So if tier 1's main contractors need to sign up for this at the beginning so they can price large contracts. They can buy the large pockets of land with many hundreds of houses on them. Remove the unfair contractual practices, so long payment terms, as we've touched on, and the tricks that people pay to, which I touched on earlier, to push back the invoice payment a little bit longer, because they're holding on to money, and more often than not, this is massive amounts, of hundreds of millions of pounds. They're using, in some cases, these monies, these retentions and late payments, they're funding their next plot of land, they're funding their next job. So they're using small contractors' money to fund their next work. If they spread themselves too thin, something goes wrong, because a lot of these jobs, they're secured on very, very low profit margins. So hence why a lot of contractors do tend to go bust, larger ones. So all that money then is just gone. It disappears into the ether. It doesn't exist no more. So a lot of SMEs are bearing the brunt of the financial risk to finance.
We can protect SMEs, because that's exactly what happened to my builder. The tier 1 company went bust, and then everything he bought, all the material he had just sitting now, and he didn't know what to do, and he'd already bought it.
Well, shorter payment terms and guaranteed payment terms, the large companies need to sign up for all these. From a roofing point of view, maybe remove the retention side of it. I know it's not a popular subject, but remove the retention, and those could be replaced with the guarantees. So for argument's sake, if a new build property has got a brand new roof on it, we've self-certified it to prove it conforms. That guarantee goes instantly to the new house owner with all the guarantees in place, cuts out the tier 1. The retention money then, there's up to around about £300 million at any given point held in retentions. So from our perspective, if that is removed, the £300 million could go back into the economy. It can help this SME build on themselves, invest in training and grow. So yeah, there are a few things that a government bond perhaps to put money from the main contractor in a bond, so should they cease trading, the small builder can actually access that rather than the money disappearing.
Yeah, okay. Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. So a lot of the time, the cash flow is part of the issue, but so is access to finance, particularly for SME house builders. Now, just 2 weeks ago, we had an announcement from the government about the National Housing Bank. So the intention, I think, being to plug the hole with 16 billion of public investment to build 500,000 homes. Now, that included in it a provision to support additional lending alliances and private sector partners. And I just wondered, so this is new, so it's accepting that there's been some issues. What do you think about that, and what do you know about it? Have you got any more details on it?
So we don't have the details, but we certainly heard about the headline. So it's very positive, and a recognition that actually finance is a major issue. We know from our own survey, 37% of our members say that access to finance is still a barrier. That has come down from the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. So this announcement that the government made is a recognition that there's a problem about access to finance, which is very positive. My understanding, though, is that the lending is for units of 10 and above, which is very small, but most of my members are building fewer than 10. So in a way, for the micro house builder, there is very little help there. They're still going to be reliant on the high street banks, where they're going to pay more money. So I welcome what the government has done. It's recognised the problem, brought it down to 10 units and above. But my plea is, what happens to those very small, those micro house builders that are building fewer than 10? Because these are the future house builders, or they should be, and they're the ones still won't benefit from this.
And just to pick up on that point, this is one of the sectors that could sort of double, couldn't it? If we get and unlock some of these issues in the process, if we deal with the planning, if we get the access to finance, we could employ many more people, we could build many more houses than currently you can. Yes. So that's actually really critical, that the micro businesses are seen as part of a growth strategy.
Yeah. And we've seen with Homes England, actually the level criterion has reduced from 10 to 5 units. So it'd be good if that lending could be brought down from 10 to 5. That would really help them, because that would capture a lot more of my members. And we want to encourage that flow from that builder dipping into house building that will take on more plots and start to grow. And then we'll start seeing a bigger delivery in homes, because as you know, we're quite a long way off the housing target.
And just finally on that, the part of this issue is that you can't build another house until you've sold the one that you've built. Right. So you're very reliant on the cash flow process moving through. Very tied up. Yeah. And part of the issue with planning, slowing everything down, was causing these issues whereby you weren't being able to sell, and obviously then you're not able to continue the profit. So it's really, really crucial that these two things come together.
Absolutely, and that explains that trend, as I mentioned, that 40% going down to 9%, and it will just continue to fall away unless we tackle that. So the government's moving in the right direction, just a bit more push.
Thank you.
Thank you. Antonia Vance.
Thank you very much, Chair. Moving on to workforce and skills then. It's clear that we don't have the workforce we need in this country to deliver on our housing targets. I'd appreciate comments from both of you on what you think we need to do to get, particularly in the SME sector, obviously, the workers that we're going to need to deliver on the housing and refurbishment retrofitting targets that we're going to have going forward. Brian, should we start with you?
Okay, thank you very much. So you're absolutely right. The skills crisis has been a problem for many years. We know there are shortages in all the trades. We know that the Construction Industry Training Board has said actually we need another 250,000 workers to actually build 1.5 million homes.
250,000 workers.
Yeah, and that's come from the CITB. But there is no shortage of young people wanting to come into the industry. What there is a shortage is of small employers taking on apprentices. And it was interesting to hear in the other session about the hairdressers, same problem, because the incentive for SME companies is quite small to take on an apprentice. So £2,000 to take on an apprentice at a time when, you know, as I was mentioning earlier, there's a cautiousness about the market. So we need to look at how do we encourage more employers to take on apprentices. I think also there's been serious underfunding of our colleges of further education over many years, which has put people off from thinking about having a career in construction. So it's good news that the government is spending millions more in our higher education, and that is going to be critical in having sort of a parity of esteem between the trades of vocational training and going to university. So that would certainly help as well. And the other issue is falling out from Grenville is about competence in the building industry, because it doesn't help that anyone can call themselves a builder. You don't need any qualifications to be a builder. And that's why we get the reputation in some quarters of cowboy builders. There should be a licensing of construction companies to ensure that actually the cowboy builders are not allowed to operate in our industry.
Yeah, so I echo a lot of Brian's sentiments there, but I think stepping back a little bit further, because now with the modern age, AI is becoming more prevalent in the workplace. So the landscape of the work is changing. So maybe a lot of uni grads now aren't going into the careers that they wanted to do, subject to, with their subjects they were studying. So if we kind of wind back to sort of school leavers, or even a year before the children leave school, perhaps bring an option into learning construction skills if that's the route they want to go down, construction and roofing in my particular subject, so they can get the right path when they leave school, so they can go to the right college. They know where they're heading a little bit before, so rather than just leave school with little or no options to go to, at least they may have an idea of where to go, because university might not be an option for everybody now, because the landscape is changing a little bit. So we might have those new people coming into the industry, but they need to be aware of it before they leave school, so they can find the correct path for them.
And if I may, Chair, just continuing on that thought, Brian and Paul, some people have said that the lack of a pipeline in the industry means that people are taken on for one job or two jobs and then they need to go and find another employer. I wondered if you could comment for me a little about whether it is pipeline, whether it is the employment model or not. We've seen considerable rise in self-employment in the construction industry. How is that affecting your members? Do your members do your members contract self-employed people, or do they employ directly, or is it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both for FMB, but historically it's been about employing directly, and so there's been a proud history of actually small companies, tight-knit, looking after their workers, but of course the model is changing with self-employed, and that's having an impact on the structure of our industry. So that needs to be recognised, but certainly the FMB has been a great advocate of direct employment and building up the skills of those people working in the small industries, because that helps with retention of staff as well. So small builders often talk about the family, because when you work together for years, you build up a very close bond, and that gets them through the difficult periods. But these are the very small companies. It's very different in the larger companies where labour can come and go, and you get sort of people in and out of work, and it's more transient, and that's not always best for the reputation of our sector, because you lose that certainty if you're wanting to go into the building industry.
And this committee has...
Well, let me just bring in Matt Weston, because I just want to...
Yes, good. Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the point about the 250,000 job shortage, I assume that maybe there is a certain ageing profile to certain specialisms. Just with the colleges point that you made, Mr. Berry, other than the Skills England, what the government's doing to put more funding in, how is it that we get more young people who want to go into these vocational skills? How do we get them actually into that? Because my understanding is that we have too few tutors actually to provide the courses.
Yes, so you're right
about a model that could be considered.
There's the option, you're quite right to identify an ageing workforce, so we're going to lose a third of the people who work in the construction industry over the next 15, 20 years. So there might be an option there for some of those people thinking of retiring or partly retiring, if we could use those skills in colleges to teach some of the courses. But I think it won't be the panacea, because people who are actually doing on-site jobs may not always make the best teachers, but there will be some. And if we could not lose that experience and find a way for them to work with colleges to train the next generation, that would be fantastic, because we're keeping the skills base in our sector.
And how could the sector help bring that about, do you think?
Well, I think, that's something we, as a trade association, we can promote and make those opportunities known to people in the building industry, because communication is a big issue in the building industry. That's where trade associations can be really helpful. But we need to make sure that we need to line up with the colleges to see what opportunities could be created. What sort of contracts would there be for people wanting to leave the industry to teach young people?
That's been incredibly helpful. Thank you. This is, I think, the second biggest sector for small businesses, so really getting your evidence down has been really important to this committee, and you've done a brilliant job at laying that out for us this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time and for the evidence that you've submitted. That concludes this panel, and that concludes this session. Order, order.